The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history, big stir in the streets of Minsk. Tactics and strategy. How do gun stabilizers work? Metal beasts. We look at the top Soviet helicopter. Meet the apex predator among the Soviet helicopters of War Thunder. The most modern modification of the Mi-24 series, the Mi-35M multi-role combat helicopter. It combines a wide array of available weapons with rather high survivability, for a heli of course. Its flexible, chin-mounted 23mm autocannon can turn 60 degrees horizontally, while the vertical guidance angle is from -40 to +10 degrees. Twin 2,200 horsepower engines allow the aircraft to climb to 500 meters at a rate of 41 meters per second. In level flight, the gunship can reach the speeds of up to 300 kph, which is admittedly not too much. The tandem cockpit is reinforced with 55mm bulletproof glass, as well as 4 and 8mm armor plates. For additional protection, you can pick one of several advanced countermeasure devices. Decoy flares and IRCM confuse infrared-guided weaponry, while the exhaust heat shield reduces the infrared signature of the helicopter. Now let's speak about our means of destruction. Our trump card here is the 9M120 Ataka ATGMs. They reach speeds of up to 550 meters per second and penetrate up to 800 millimeters of armor. These are the fastest anti-tank missiles available in the game. They're effective against any ground and a variety of air targets. However, the 9K114 Sturm ATGMs that you can use from the get-go and which are capable of piercing 650 millimeters of armor are pretty fast as well. Suspended 23mm autocannons are similar to the one mounted in the chin turret. They have both an excellent fire rate and a high enough caliber, allowing you to deal with both aircraft and lightly armored ground vehicles with equal ease. Finally, there are also S-8KO rockets with a max speed of 610 meters per second and a penetration rate of up to 400 millimeters. The salvo of these rockets will turn any target that has failed to dodge into a smoldering pile of junk in a blink of an eye. How do you play the Mi-35M? Close-in engagements are not its forte. The gunship's speed, pretty low as it is, drops to 180 kph during maneuvers. Given the considerable size of the aircraft, you might even be hit with a tank cannon. Therefore, the optimal tactic is to keep your distance and, while staying under the radar, to destroy ground targets one by one with your ATGMs. Most anti-aircraft guns aren't a serious threat at this range, and your IRCM suite will help you to avoid being hit by a missile even if you fail to notice the launch. However, with a certain level of skill, you can play more aggressively. In that case, you should rely not on ATGMs, but on a mixed setup consisting of unguided missiles and additional gun pods. Frontal armor offers decent protection from the fire of tank machine guns. As for the flak guns, you need to deal with those in advance. Still, you should always know when to disengage. The Mi-35 is more of a utility helicopter than a flying tank after all. All in all, the Mi-35 performs really well as a support helicopter, helping the team to break through enemy flanks almost anywhere on the map. During the morning of June 27, 1941, the evacuation of one of the Commissariat of Defense storage facilities was almost over. A commander responsible for the evacuation couldn't possibly withdraw all the equipment and supplies, and was forced to order the burning of everything that wasn't hauled away. That included, among other things, one T-28 tank. However, Senior Sergeant Dmitry Malkor decided to save it and use it to withdraw. He got the tank rolling and soon caught up with the retreating convoy. However, before long, the engine stalled. While the sergeant was tinkering with the motor, an unfamiliar major with 3 cadets approached him. Malkor didn't even remember their surnames. For him, the stranger has remained Comrade Major. They were destined to part ways in less than a day, but at that moment they were busy reanimating the tank in a slapdash manner and driving it back to Minsk. The major knew where one could find fuel and ammunition in the city. By that time, Minsk was under German control for 3 days. Cars and armored vehicles were going in and out all the time, and the permit system hadn't been imposed yet. Thus, the T-28 didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. The city was drowning in Soviet hardware. Our crew was able to get the resources they needed, and after that, they decided to do what tanks are actually made for: to wage war. Their first targets were an armored car, a truck, and a platoon of soldiers on Varashilov Street. The armored car burst into flames after a single hit. They squashed the truck like a bug with a ram, and the scattered Germans were raked with machine gun fire delivered by the cadets. Then, on Grabanaya Street, a motorcycle column came toward the tank and was shot down at point blank. Driving through Sovietskaya Street, tank crew blasted a bunch of Nazis with an HE round. Then they made it to the city's center, the riverside of Svislak. There, they stumbled upon the mustered German military equipment and towering piles of ammo crates. German soldiers sure remembered the following, at least those who managed to survive. The T-28 opened fire on the enemy with oiled weapons, recalled Malkor. The major dropped one shell after another upon the clusters of vehicles, and the cadets decimated the enemy with machine guns. Only when the embankment was shrouded in smoke so thick that no aiming was possible did the commander give the order to retreat. The crew, taking full advantage of the enemy's confusion, were able to drive through a few blocks without any hindrance. They had already reached the outskirts of the city when suddenly a powerful blow shook the tank. A German shell hit the rear of the hull, piercing the armor. A fire broke out in the engine compartment. The crew barely managed to escape out of the burning vehicle before the ammo, or what was left of it, finally detonated. Not all of them made it out alive. Some perished, one got captured. The senior sergeant Dmitry Malkor was lucky, though. The locals sheltered him. A month later, he was able to cross the front line and rejoin the army. For the second time, Dmitry Malkor drove in Minsk on a T-34. When the war was over, he was already in East Prussia as a senior lieutenant to boot. Time and again, we've been asked in the comments about gun stabilizers. What are they, and what advantages do they provide in the game? This is one of the times when it's easier to show. We'll begin with a tank without a stabilizer, and then switch to vehicles equipped with progressively more sophisticated stabilization systems. This way, you will see how they actually affect gameplay. Let's start with the early Soviet T-34. This example really helps to understand why you might need a stabilizer in the first place. After coming to a complete halt, the gun abruptly tilts down following the suspension, then rises just as sharply, and only after that can the gunner get to work. There are ways to minimize those bounce backs, or even use them to your advantage. We elaborated on those in the 125th episode of The Shooting Range, by the way. Today, though, we have an opposite goal in mind. We try to get the hang of the stabilization mechanisms, so let's move on. Shoulder stop. It's the very first and most primitive type of gun stabilizer. Shoulder stops can be found on a few low-rank tanks, like the British Crusader or the Matilda. Essentially, shoulder stop is just a kind of buttstock resting on a gunner's shoulder. This type of stabilizing equipment can only be utilized if the gun itself is quite light and well balanced, effectively allowing one to hold a steady, or a steadier, aim while moving. This kind of stabilization works only at low speeds, and even then, as you can see, it's far from ideal. On the other hand, after a sudden stop, the gunner compensates for the tilt with his own weight, so the gun can be aimed at the target almost instantly. Next up is a full-fledged vertical stabilizer. They came into wide use during World War II. For instance, a stabilizing mechanism of this type was installed on the American Shermans. We're speaking about the Westinghouse hydraulic stabilizer, which compensated for the swinging of the gun in a vertical plane. It allowed the gunner to keep steady aim at higher speeds and minimized tilts when accelerating or braking. Here we start moving, and now we slow down. The stabilizer is doing well. However, at high speeds, greater than 15 kph, it clearly isn't enough. That's when we come to the most advanced system available in the game, the two-plane stabilizer. Stabilizers of this type can be found on British Centurions, for example, but the relatively low aiming speed of their cannons won't allow you to see the full power of this kind of stabilization. More recent MBTs are a whole different story. The cannon stabilizer of the new Abrams is a complex computer with an array of sensors connected to the gunfire control system. Now we're talking. That's some real buttersmooth movement right there. At rest or on the move, on a flat road or rough terrain, when accelerating or braking, the cannon remains well stabilized even at a speed of between 45 and 50 kph. By now, all these different kinds of stabilizers are already implemented in the game. Remember how they work, and you'll be able to use them to their full potential, provided that you have mastered your combat vehicle, of course. And now to our traditional hotline. Herr Doctor. Climbing the ranks with French tanks, please. Hi there. We've literally received this comment seconds after we've finished and started uploading the video about French tanks. So, in case you missed it, it's already on the channel. Check the top right corner and enjoy. Cobra. Comments, will you add, improve? They know that you guys are giving ideas, but they can't always work non-stop. On the contrary, dear Cobra, we are mostly working non-stop. You can't even begin to imagine how many of your ideas we've already got either in progress or finished and ready to launch. Or at least we're planning to start working on them in the nearest possible future. Unfortunately, we can't answer most of those "will you" and "when" questions until official announcements are made. So, mostly we just read these comments and feel happy for those of you who are gonna get a pleasant surprise in a short while. Nate loves to tank. I want to work for you guys. Any open positions? Sure. You're more than welcome to check our site, gaijinent.com, specifically the career section. All the positions currently open are always listed in there. Ludovic Kramar. I'm still wondering if the carrot thing of April Fools is real or not. Help. You know, our historian Pinky promised us that the story was as real as himself. But come to think of it, that Pinky promise was also given on April Fools. Lover Master. Any chance we could meet the drivers behind the wheels and sticks of the vehicle triathlons? Hi there. Let us remind you that the triathlon is not a competition of drivers, but of machines themselves. We do everything we can to ensure that a separate driver's skill could not influence the outcome of the trials. So let them stay behind the curtain and not distract you from the main thing, getting to know which of the machines is actually better in real battle simulations. Ian McEwen. I have an idea. Could you do a triathlon of the heaviest vehicles in the game? Hello there. We've already done something like that in episode 135. It was the competition between the heaviest SPGs in the game. Or do you want to see a battle between the heaviest machines of them all? John Wick.
Grandpa Bruce, can you tell me a bedtime story?
Are you lying down comfortably, little one? Listen. Once upon a time, there lived a good boy. He watched the shooting range by Gaijin Entertainment every week and never missed a single video. Why, you ask? Because he remembered to subscribe to the channel and even pressed the magic bell. And it always kept him updated on the newest released videos on the channel. And he lived happily ever after. Sweet dreams. See you in a week on War Thunder Channel. Night night.